welcome to Metamorphosis with Toby. If this is your first time listening or watching, depending on whatever platform you're joining us from, welcome again. And if you're a returning viewer or listener, thank you for always coming back. And so today we have a guest with us, and she's not a first time guest. She's always been on this platform. She is a mental health therapist with experience working with children, adolescents, as well as young adults, and she currently provides individual counseling services to children who have sexualized behaviors and have been sexually abused. And so today with me, I have Adedamilola Ogun. Thank you so much for coming, Dami.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always good to be here.
Thank you for always showing up on this platform. And so, as we all know, this month we're in the month of April, and apart from the Black maternal health kind of week that's going on, this month is Child Abuse Prevention Month, or say Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. And so today on this platform, we raise our voices to break the silence surrounding this critical issue. So we say join us as we delve into the profound issues of child abuse, to shed light on the importance of prevention as well as support. And so together we'll navigate the complexities of child abuse, of this topic, with empathy and understanding, and the shared commitment to creating a safer world for all children. And so I would say, let us all speak against child abuse and stand up for those who need our voices the most. Again, thank you so much for coming, Dami. So very quickly, like I always say, research shows that there's an estimate of 1 in 4 children have experienced abuse or neglect at some point of their lives. And so child abuse and neglect, they pose a serious public health problem, which unfortunately is preventable or can be prevented. And so very quickly, I would say maybe let's start by having Dami walk us through some of the misconceptions around child abuse. And I say this misconceptions, maybe not misconceptions, but I think to an extent misconceptions, because for some reason there are sometimes when we think about, from my point of view, before we have Dami walk us through this, for some reason I think that when we think about child abuse, we think about physical abuse for the most part, leaving or neglecting some other parts. And sometimes when we think about sexual abuse, we think about older adults or females for the most part. I know that's a different case, but today we want to delve into child abuse. And so maybe there are some misconceptions that need to be spoken about. And so Dami would walk us through just a few of these misconceptions. You have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think you already kind of said one of the things that I was thinking about, or like I wanted to mention, right? So when we talk about abuse, like most times we always think about physical abuse, that it has to be violent for it to be abuse. But then there are other kind of abuse, like, we have, sexual abuse, we have neglect, we have, emotional abuse and things like that. So most times when people feel like, it's not violent, then there's no need for us to step in because it's not violent. And that's a misconception. And just like you said about sexual abuse too, or maybe let me talk about abuse in general. I think people always think that, when a child is abused, they will talk about it, but that won't happen because most times, like, the children are scared. They are too scared to talk about it, or the person abusing them, either sexually, physically, is known to them, right? So they are scared of, the repercussions that could come out of that. So if a child is either physically abused or sexually abused or anything like that, it's rare that they will come to you to tell you, oh, this is what is going on. I mean, some kids will like tell you like would come to tell you like, oh, this is what is going on, but most times they wouldn't because they are scared. And maybe the last thing that I'll talk about is that people always think that abuse is usually from like strangers, like, oh, only a stranger would do that to a kid, like, only a stranger would scream and yell and kick a child like that, or sexually abuse a child or things like that. But when it even comes to sexual abuse, about 85% of the time the child always knows the person who abused them. And it's very interesting. So most times abuse, we should not look at it from like, oh, it's something that comes from outside. It's usually like on the inside.
On the inside.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think my next question, and I think you touched on it a bit, would be what is child abuse itself? I know we have mentioned something about physical abuse, sexual abuse, but if you would maybe dive into it a bit deeper, what child abuse is itself?
Okay. Child abuse is a failure on the part of failure or action or inaction of a parent, a caregiver, guardian, just somebody that's supposed to be taking care of the child. Their failure or not their failure to act, or how do I put it now? Let me try to gather my thoughts a little bit more.
Okay.
So when somebody who is supposed to take care of a child takes actions or doesn't take actions, that then leads to the death of a child, because sometimes like child abuse leads to death, or that causes like physical harm to the child or causes mental harm to the child, then that is child abuse. As long as you're taking certain actions that are harming the child, or you are not taking certain actions and your inaction is causing harm to the child. So that's generally child abuse. And child abuse, like about, I read it online, like about 1,820 children died of child abuse in 2021 in the United States. So it's not something that oh, it's just random and it doesn't really happen. It's just a few people it happens. Sometimes when we don't take steps to protect children, they actually die.
Thank you. So I like that you did say that you did mention inactions as well. So that child abuse also comes in the form of our inactions, our inability to act, to say something, or to say when we see things. And I know that further along we would go on to touch on how we would on some of these things, but I really appreciate that you did say that our actions and even our inactions can result in or be a form of child abuse. And so also I would like you to talk to us about the differences between child abuse and child neglect. And sometimes maybe even deeper, maybe I am talking from personal experience, being an African, Nigerian and all, and growing up with our parents, we experience some things that maybe now that we are grown, then we look back and we say that, man,
that was wrong.
Child abuse. That was child abuse. As little as it might have seemed, or not something that wasn't weighty, that would have So if you could talk to us about child abuse, child neglect, if there are differences and all.
Okay. Well, I mean, child neglect is a type of abuse. So we have like different types, right? We have physical, we have emotional, we have sexual, and then we have neglect. So neglect is a type of abuse. So in terms of neglect, it's more like, the parent or the caregiver or person supposed to be taking care of the child does not get them their basic needs. Like their basic needs are not being met. And when we say basic needs, I mean like food, shelter, medical attention. Let's say a child is sick, the parent is supposed to take the child to the hospital, but you're not taking the child to the hospital. Why? We don't know. So those are the type of things that contribute to child neglect. Or like maybe your child has maybe some educational needs, and or maybe this child needs more support in school or needs things like that, but you're not catering to that. Then that's also neglect. Or you're not providing food for the child, you're not providing shelter for the child, and things like that. So and another one is you're not providing appropriate supervision. So there are some kids that maybe you just go out, you leave like your 7-year-old kid at home with a 10-year-old. Like, what does a 10? You get what I'm trying to say? What does a 10-year-old know to take it? Like, what exactly? Yes, to take it. 7-year-old or a 6-year-old. So things like that, lacking appropriate supervision, not providing basic needs, not providing like appropriate medical attention, especially when it's serious. Not necessarily even when it's serious, but things like that. So that's neglect. Yeah. And then for physical abuse, I'm supposed to like explain each of them. Start watching.
Yeah. No, whichever works for you is fine. Yes, you're the scholar here. You're the boss here.
Okay, so and then sexual abuse is non-consent, like any non-consensual touch to a child, right? And that could include it could be as deep as rape. Right? It could also be something like showing a child pornographic content. It could also be something like touching a child's genitals or telling a child to touch the adult's genitals. So generally anything that brings pleasure to the adult or to the older child sexually, that's child abuse. That's sexual abuse. Anything that it doesn't matter what it is, as long as the other person, the older adult, the older child is benefiting from it sexually, and then the child is part of it, that's sexual abuse. And then physical abuse, like we said, we've already kind of talked about it before, such as like things like they are non-accidental. It's not like it's an accident. Yeah, so they are non-accidental injuries that are caused by the guardian, parent, or caregiver, right? Like eating, biting, punching, throwing things at somebody. What else can I think about? But those type of things. Beating, depending on what that's also part of it. And like
right
those
now,
type
I'm
of
like,
things,
I'm like remembering. Like,
as long as beating, kicking, like punching, pinching, like all those things, it's physical. And most of the times, like you would see that like those things leave bruises and scars on the body. So as long as you're seeing that, then it's abuse. It's physical abuse. And then emotional abuse, for this one, most of the time, like people like it's not something that you really notice, right? Because like I said, because people feel like it's not violent. Oh, I'm not seeing anything on the person's body, or there's no sign that anything. Exactly, it's more emotional. Like you are threatening a child, or you criticize the child every time, or you don't show love to the child, or you belittle the child, disgrace the child, embarrass the child. Those kind of things, they cause they damage the child emotionally.
Yeah, so I like that you touched on emotional abuse, because there's this quote that says that abuse is a thief of innocence and an assassin of self-esteem. So thinking about that quote, I can take it. Abuse is the thief of innocence and the assassin of self-esteem. And now I'm thinking about your explanation on emotional abuse. like it doesn't play out like we would naturally see scars and all on like physical, but then it goes on. That's what I think. It goes on to play out maybe later in life, in a couple of years to come. And so sometimes you see people, sometimes they don't have a good self-esteem, not because of anything. Sometimes it might be some of the experiences, while growing up. And so right now, I think my next question would be that how does abuse, whichever form, manifest differently in younger children versus older children or even adults?
Well, I mean, going back to what you just said about how sometimes like some people just grow up having like low self-esteem and things like that. If every time as a child nobody showed that you were relevant, nobody appreciated any effort you put into anything, every time you did something it was one insult or the other. Oh, maybe you're stupid, you're not this and you're not that, you're not going to, if you keep hearing that, you internalize it, right? And then you begin to think that, oh, maybe that is what I am. If the people that are supposed to care about me and people that are supposed to love me are telling me this is who I am, then maybe that is what I am. So, it manifests in adults as that, like, low self-esteem. It could also be like coming out as like panic attacks, anxiety, and all these things. They could have, I don't know, they could have it could come from different things, right? So it's not like a one size fits all, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So when it comes to older adults, what do I mean older adults? When it comes to adults, so it could manifest as different things, right? Like, but one of the things is like, low self-esteem. If it's, emotional abuse, they could have issues in relationship, have issues trusting people because they couldn't attach well with their caregivers, right? They don't trust what people will do to them. They don't trust how people will react. And sometimes they could even be people that become very maybe obsessed in a relationship. They always want to do the right thing so that nobody will push me out or things like that. So for adults, it can be different things. And we would put that in the maybe box of, trauma and how trauma could come up in people's lives. So it could show up as different things. It could show up in your relationship. It could show up in how you view yourself. It's low self-esteem sometimes that leads to like all these maybe eating disorders, body dysmorphia. So like it just, there are different ways that it could go with adults, especially when they've not dealt with it as a child. Okay. So if they've not dealt with it, it can come out as different things. It also come out as like self-destructive behaviors, drinking, substance use, all those kind of things. And
rage sometimes.
Yes. Problems with alcohol, taking different type of substances, self-harm, things like that. And that could also show up with adolescents too, that are experiencing abuse. A lot of self-destructive behaviors, behavioral problems like being withdrawn. It can go like different extremes, right? You can just be very withdrawn, or you can become like really aggressive, which can be different from who you are, on a normal day. If you get, and that's really, it could come out in different ways. So if you are looking at somebody and you're like, oh, maybe this person was abused as a child or something like that, you have to think about, okay, so what are the other experiences? Because sometimes there are some people that go through that and still come out, they're resilient.
Yeah.
Not saying that the other people that have like the issues are not resilient, but we all have things that we all have
mechanisms.
Our coping are different. So it just depends. And for younger kids, obviously, and for also adolescents, like, you see bruises all over, scars, um they could also have like behavioral changes in school, like maybe getting very upset all the time, or being withdrawn, or sometimes they can even say, I don't they become aversive to a particular person or a particular place. They're like, you know what, I don't want to go there. There's sometimes that like kids will be like, they will just sit down and they'll be crying and say, I this place I don't want to go, or this person I don't want to see them. In those kind of cases, I mean, it could be a one-off thing, but you can also like want to check in a little bit. If all of a sudden a child is saying, I don't like this person, or I don't want to go to this person. There are even times where like they'll have issues in school, like academics. They can't concentrate, and you can't trace the concentration back to, maybe it's anything physical or physiological. They just can't concentrate in school and things like that. Try to see if I can think of any other thing, but those are like the major things that you will see. A lot of behavioral changes, and it could be from different extremes, and maybe coming to school late, looking dirty, like looking unkept and things like that.
Okay. So I know that you work with children, and
Yeah.
I'm guessing you have seen basically some of these cases. So
Yeah.
how do you see children? How do you know that they have any of this experience, or they have been abused in any way? I know one time we did talk about maybe how they play amongst themselves, or maybe they take a toy, they destroy it. I don't know. I know you would have seen maybe a couple of
I mean, the thing about working with kids is that like you just have to be observant, right? So if a child comes in with a lot of bruises, unexplained bruises, right? I'm like, oh, so what happened to you? And you're like, oh, maybe I fell down on my bike, and I can't like relate falling down on a bike to the bruises that I'm seeing. Then I'm probably gonna do something about it. I'm going to report that, right? I saw these bruises on this child's body. The child explained that this was what happened, but I don't think I believe it, right? And what happens is that like I'm a mandated reporter. So if I suspect that something is going on with a child, and sometimes like kids will not say anything, or if I notice a child has been missing a lot of appointments, like, so for the kids I see, that we see them weekly, right? So if I see a child has been missing a lot of appointments, hasn't been coming to appointments, I've been trying to reach the parent, I haven't been able to reach the parent and things like that. So I might have to like reach out to the caseworker, this is what is going on, maybe check on the child, something like that. You get that type of thing. So it just depends. It doesn't have to be like something really big. If you get that. And sometimes like even if kids are playing, well, there are times that kids can show it in their play, right? Like they can take a child can take a doll and then put it on another doll and try to maybe show like some sexual activity between the dolls, right? I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean the child was abused, but it seems like the child probably has more sexual knowledge than they should adapt. So, and that's also another pointer, right? If a child has like is acting out sexually, maybe touching the genitals in like open places after you've told the child to stop, continues to do that, or forces other children to engage in activities with him even when you said no, and things like that, then you want to look like, oh, what's going on, and things and things like that. So
so I think that this has even touched a bit in part on my next question that was supposed to be on some of the signs that someone would recognize when you see a child that has been that has been abused or even neglected. So I think I would now like to ask is how does one determine whether they should report a suspected case of abuse? I know you are mandated. That's your job. I'm guessing that's by law. You are mandated
Yeah.
to report. But how do we, listening, watching, here, and how do we determine whether we should report case or not? And I'm asking this question also thinking about different locations, like thinking about being in the US or being in the UK versus being in Africa or in Nigeria and all. But I'm just saying generally.
Very tricky.
Yes, I know that was why I brought that. I'm like, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, I think that even like in the United States or maybe other developed countries, right? They will have there's some states that maybe all persons around the child are mandated reporters, while in some places maybe it's just people that work with children. So you might want to like go online to check, am I a mandated reporter just as being somebody staying in the States? Am I a mandated reporter? Right? And you don't have to. The thing about reporting is that you're not an investigator, right? You see some things that you feel like are not right about the child, right? Okay. Maybe you see some changes, you see, some bruises that are healing, and then you see new bruises, things like that. So that shows that, there's continuous abuse.
Yes.
And maybe sometimes the child can tell you, maybe, I don't know, but I've not seen that happen. But, the child can tell you, but you're not investigating. You're just saying, this is what I've seen. This is not normal for the child. And I'm just going to report. And whatever the Child Protective Services does with that, you don't know, right? But you've done your part and you've reported. And at least I know for here in the United States, like you can report to your county's DSS. So that's the Department of Social Services. And you can always go online. You can call them. You go online, you can see the number. And then I think sometimes you can report through like a form online. And you just need like maybe the child's information, what you saw, the child's address, and maybe the parents' information, I think. So at least I know like throughout the United States, you can report to like DSS, CPS. And whatever they do with the information, you don't know, right? But the most important thing is that, I've seen these signs in this child and I've reported. So you are not investigating. You are not saying, oh, I saw this thing and, I'm really going to go ask the mom, what happened.
You have to take in, you have to arrest this person.
Yes, no, you are not. That's not. I mean, if you feel like the child is in danger and you feel like if the child will go back home, they're going to be hurt, then you can call 911. And they'll take it up from there. But it's not like, you are putting on like investigation hat and you are, moving all around, asking questions and all those type of things. Okay. Now let's go to Nigeria. The thing about, I know that there are some I feel like the culture is different, right? The culture is like very different, and we have to take that into consideration. There's some things that like beating a child and things like that. There are some people that don't see that as abuse. They don't see that as, like, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Our parents did that too.
Yes.
Our parents did that to us and we survived. So why will you say that it's a problem? And stuff like that. So the culture is different. And if you... I just feel like it's very tricky. I think that the idea about abuse and what we know about abuse now is not something that is really common like in Nigeria. And it gets very tricky. If the child, they'll be like, why would you want to take a child away from the parents? They are disciplining the child and things like that. And there are some advocacy centers, I believe, but from what I know, I don't think that we have any laws, not necessarily laws, or any agency protecting children as at now. So the only things that people around children can do is maybe talk to the parents if they can, and try to make sure that the child is safe, or maybe taking the child out of that situation or something like that. But the culture is just different, and we don't have anything in place to actually protect children when that happens.
Thank you so much, Dami. So right now you have touched on maybe I would say how or where one can report seeing any form of child abuse. I know for here you have said that could be reported to Child Protective Services, I guess. Yeah, then there's the DSS. Yeah, you did talk about even calling 911 if even calling 911, and I think that there are also I think that there are also some, like when you just go online, you see some hotlines. You know how they have this hotlines here. So there are different hotlines that one could report this to, and so Dami also went back to talking on how tricky it can be in Nigeria, and I totally agree with that, because these are two different worlds, and like you said, there are some advocacy centers or groups in Nigeria that are maybe even brewing, but I think it's still a tricky space.
I know it's tricky.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe I would say how or where one can report seeing any form of child abuse. I know for here you have said that could be reported to Child Protective Services, I guess. Yeah, then there's the DSS. Yeah, you did talk about even calling 911 if even calling 911, and I think that there are also I think that there are also some, like when you just go online, you see some hotlines. You know how they have this hotlines here. So there are different hotlines that one could report this to, and so Dami also went back to talking on how tricky it can be in Nigeria, and I totally agree with that, because these are two different worlds, and like you said, there are some advocacy centers or groups in Nigeria that are maybe even brewing, but I think it's still a tricky space.
I know it's tricky.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a bit tricky, but you can talk to the parents if you can. And also I'd like to re-emphasize what Dami said, that about being observant. We can be observant, but also remember you are not an investigator in this case.
Yeah.
When you see something, you report it to appropriate services or systems, and you leave it. You don't go about trying to make sure that this person has to be arrested and all of that. You just do your part and you go. And thank you so much for emphasizing all of those. And so I know that, I would like to say that we grew up in kind of spaces of society that it's like communal. You know how they say it takes a village to raise a child. So I would like to ask how can the community, and I know when we say community can be maybe your church Community might be even your neighborhood community, might be maybe at your workplace and all. But whatever it is you call community, how can community or we as individuals contribute to keeping children safe?
Yeah, getting more, learning more about the science. There are a lot of resources online, like going online to learn more about, child abuse, the different kinds, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and things like that. Just keeping yourself up to date about, more information about, this particular aspect. Because if you don't know what to look out for, then there's no way you're going to know if anything is going wrong, right? I feel like that's number one. And then second, is to teach your children, like teach the children that, this is not supposed to be happening, right? Someone is not supposed to be doing this to you. Someone is not supposed to be hitting you or pinching you or things like that. If anything like that happens, like talk to people that you trust, aside the people that are doing it to you, right? And it could be for different kinds, but just leaving an open space for children, like teaching them their rights, teaching them, you have a right to be safe, and nobody has a right to, make you feel unsafe. If you ever feel unsafe, come to me, or things like that. Even if it's their parent or their caregivers, you as somebody in the community can teach children that, and teaching them about, especially when it comes to like sexual abuse and things like that, like teaching about their bodies, people that their safety networks, sex education, things like that. Because if they don't know, they just don't know.
They just don't know. Yes, if they don't know,
Yeah.
they just don't know.
So they don't know. Aside like learning about it yourself, but also teaching the kids in, age appropriate ways, of course, like about what feels safe and what feels unsafe, and who they can talk to if that happens. Giving them that open space where they know that, if anything happens to me, I can always talk to this person, or I can always talk to that person, and they wouldn't judge me or criticize me.
Okay. All right. Thank you for all of this. So are there any other things you think you would want to maybe add to all of this that you have said, maybe about maybe specific things that we should do? I know that's like what you just talked about. Are there any other things you want to add, maybe that I didn't ask?
I don't think so. Just like you said, like as adults, children are a vulnerable population, and we are giving that. Even if they are not our children, like biological children, they are vulnerable, and it's only the adults around them that can protect them. And we should always give children that space to be able to come to us with anything, right? And we should also learn about, how some of these things are happening, so that we can help kids around us and they don't fall prey, like they don't die or anything like that. There are a lot of resources about, even a lot of movies about, real life child abuse issues and what happened to those kids. Very sad, but we can educate ourselves. Educate yourself, and educate yourself.
That's so I think that we cannot overemphasize that part on educating yourself. So like in a very brief or to summarize again is be observant, be observant about things, learn different things about child abuse. There are different forms of child abuse. There's the physical abuse, there's the sexual abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's even neglect, which is also a form of abuse. And so also there are ways that we can see these signs when we notice things on from children or with children that are not maybe necessarily normal. These are sometimes can be, we're not saying it's necessarily maybe sexual abuse or something. It's just something that we can hold on to and say, oh, this child is doing something strange, or maybe it's beginning to behave in a manner that they necessarily would not. And I think that, yeah, and it's consecutive. Yeah. So again, be observant, and as Dami emphasized just now, be educated, or get more education on all of this. We learn every day, and I know I did catch a couple of things here today. And so for today, I would end with an excerpt from the Children's Trust of South Carolina, and it says that raising awareness is a critical first step in preventing child abuse and neglect. And so when we take action, we help families to thrive. We help children to have the opportunity to grow up safe, healthy, and strong. Again, when we do this, we help children to not only grow up safe, but we help them to be healthy and also to be strong individuals. So thank you so much for joining Metamorphosis with Toby. And today we touched on child abuse, because April is Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month, and that is part of what we are doing today. Again, we had Dami talk to us about all of this. Thank you so much, Dami, and well done on all you do as a mental health specialist dealing with children, and I'm